we have focused on the smaller to medium-sized companies. They may have a higher risk profile. They can make decisions faster, but they also have teams that will collaborate with your team to make sure the product's working.
This week, we've got Dalvi from OSARO joining Manufacturing Happy Hour. We're talking about warehouse automation, but we're also talking about what calculated growth means to a startup or a high-growth company. We discuss what different founders bring to the table, whether that's someone with an industry background, an academic background, plus we get into sports, bar crawls, and more. All this on Manufacturing Happy Hour. Seeing that we're in the middle of literally like a vinyl listening lounge.
This is a great location.
It's a great location. One might think it's like, wow, you're going to do a podcast with background noise. You better believe we're daring to do a podcast in a vinyl lounge in Trillium Brewing in Boston Seaport District, where we are throwing a party after this.
Yes, that is true. There's a few sponsors. We're excited to be one, and Apparently, I've been following Joe Fenty on Instagram. I found that out last night after we talked about him, and I'm really excited to see the comedy show.
Yeah, no, it's I thought that might happen with you and a few others, right? Where you realize after the fact, it's like, oh, Joe Fenty is that guy. And for the audience out there, right, for context, he is a comedian that basically spoofs corporate culture,
right,
and makes fun of a lot of the buzzwords that are within startups and within the industry. So I thought he was the perfect comedian to have for an event like this. We're out here in Boston. He's based in Boston. So by the time this airs, that event will be long in the past, but it certainly won't be the last party that Manufacturing Happy Hour throws.
That's right.
And we were getting ready for this. We might as well paint the picture of where we are, because I feel like a lot of, folks in the industry travel to Boston, and specifically Seaport, which is its own little bubble in Boston. But we were getting ready for this podcast at row 34 last night.
Yes,
I think
row 34. And fun fact, we were eating across the street from where Karen Reed stays.
Yes.
Apparently.
Yes.
Apparently.
A local legend, infamous local legend.
That's right.
Would that be the way to
That's
describe
right.
her these days? Yeah, Boston is a town of many layers, to say the least. But we were drowning ourselves in seafood and crustaceans and monkfish and a pretty good beer and wine list last night as well.
That's right.
For the folks out there, if you're ever in Seaport, make sure you hit up Trillium Brewing and row 34. You will not regret it. Just get a reservation early. So, but we're not here to talk purely about the restaurants. We kind of are, but we're here to talk about your story. So, Adi, let's talk about this. I'm interested to hear. Let's first talk about OSARO, right? In Manufacturing Happy Hour fashion, you guys are laser focused on piece picking in warehouses. But how do you describe it as if you're having a beer with someone?
Yeah. So, if my mom drank beer, which I'm trying to get her into it, she still ask me, what do I do for a living?
Sure.
And so, I've been a part of these companies in warehouse automation for close to 10 years now. OSARO is certainly one of the most unique ones that I've been a part of. And if I were to describe it to my mom over a beer or a friend over a beer, I would tell them that we have developed vision, software, and machine learning, which is a component of artificial intelligence, and we integrate it with articulating arm robots to give them hand-eye coordination so we can pick your package in the warehouse.
I like it. That was actually a very simple, deliberate description that captured a lot of the finer points without, losing anyone in that process. I like that. Yeah, you're a pro at this, Adi. It's good to have you here.
Yeah, thank you.
And we're going to get into OSARO a little bit today. We're also going to get, I'd say, even more into OSARO's journey, because I feel like that's something that a lot of the folks listening to this can draw a lot of lessons from, because the way you described it last night when I was, face deep in monkfish and squid ink pasta, was that OSARO was very calculated with their growth. And I think that's something that folks, especially folks that listen to startups, can learn from this episode. So what does that mean, calculated growth? Give us the intro, and then I'll get into some specific questions.
Yeah, so OSARO started 2015, co-founders Derek and MK. They started the company, came out of stealth in about 2016, 2017, had their first deployment in about 2019. And it was calculated growth because I think what they wanted to do is they wanted to have a deployable product before they actually deployed to a customer site, right? And I think that's really important because you don't want to deploy a research project into your customers' warehouses where they're actually fulfilling orders for their customers.
Yeah.
So they took the time that they needed to make sure that the technology was reliable enough to put in a production environment before actually deploying. And I think that was the key.
Yeah.
So between 2019, call it 2020, and now, we have a product that is very easily deployable, but also scalable, which is an extremely important thing in this industry. We talked about what makes you a startup, right? And I was thinking about this last night after our discussion, because I don't think we're a startup anymore. I mean, we've been in this business for, call it, almost 10 years.
Yeah.
And I would call us an early stage growth company
Okay.
where you're no longer sort of the startup. You're at that inflection point where you're crossing the chasm. I don't know if you've ever read that book, but we're about to cross that chasm and scale to the point where, the company's going to go to big places.
I like that you bring up that clarification because I did have some questions about that just in terms of where your trajectory is, kind of, let's say, the runway that startups have, right? Because OSARO's been doing this for 10 years. You've been successful doing it. And I don't think of a lot of 10-year companies as like a startup per se.
Right.
It's like but like you said, you're in that growth phase.
Yeah,
at
it
this
takes
point.
a long time to get your product right, and that's what they did. And the other thing that we've done very well is we've stayed lean. We're a 45, 50-person company, and we intend to stay lean. And you obviously need to do that to conserve some of that runway.
Adi, you had mentioned something as we were starting the calculated growth for startups conversation, in that you had the time to kind of develop the solution, so you weren't deploying a research project. You've been around the block with various startups. You've also just seen the ecosystem from the inside for a long time. Why is it, and there might be some obvious answers to this, why is it that companies rush to get the product out there when it's still in the research phase? And when it comes to funding and the limited runway folks have, I understand why that's part of it, but is there another deeper reason you see folks try to deploy when it's still too much of a research project?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think what happens in a lot of companies that are in this space, I think OSARO, one of the reasons why they're unique is because our founders have come from industry.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that later, but go into it now. It's appropriate that we dive into it.
They've come from industry, so they understand the problem and they want to solve it. It's not like they have a product and then they want to just like put it out in the marketplace. They're really trying to solve a problem. And I think because they have come from industry, they know that deploying research projects within customer sites is not necessarily going to work all that well.
Yeah. Well, another question I have is, it wasn't just the fact that they were in a position where they could, when OSARO was getting started, you weren't deploying the research projects, but also I feel like you were very deliberate about the customers as a company. What does it mean to pick the right customers?
Yeah, so I think we have sort of focused on the smaller to medium-sized companies, and when you're first getting your products into the marketplace, it's important to focus on a lot of those types of companies. Yeah. And the reason is because they may have a higher risk profile, they can make decisions faster, but they also have teams that will collaborate with your team to make sure the product's working, right?
Yeah.
And so, we've done a really good job of finding those customers in our early stages. And now we're at the point where we can say, okay, we can go after the larger whales,
Yeah.
so to speak, because the product is proven in production environments.
So, in that case, let's summarize this, right? The 3 criteria for the right customer, what would you say those are? I think you mentioned 3 right there. I just want to make sure we get them explicitly for the leaders out there that are listening.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it's small to medium-sized companies as you're starting up.
So size. Yep.
It's going to be your customers' teams and the way they're gonna work with some of these newer technology companies. And the third one, what was the third one? I'm drawing a blank.
You talked about risk profile.
Risk profile.
Yep.
Right. So smaller to medium-sized companies have the ability to maybe make decisions much faster than large whales, right? And so those three things combined, I think, make if a company has that kind of profile, they're probably more willing to do business with a startup.
Yeah. One thing I think that's worth asking is, before trying to deploy at scale, the founders of OSARO really cut their teeth. What does cutting your teeth look like when it comes to perfecting the technology, if you will, making sure it's ready for prime time, for larger customers, etc.?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it happens in the lab at your shop. If you go into OSARO's office in the Bay, you walk downstairs where our 15,000 square foot robot playroom is at. You see thousands and thousands of different SKUs sitting on the shelves that we've tested with over the years, right? That coupled with finding some good integrator partners in the early stages, that allow you to kind of put your product on their floor, and them sort of taking a chance with you, but going through those paces and really testing your product, making sure it's robust with actual products that you're going to pick and place. Is going to be very important as you move from very, very early company to somebody that can scale.
So on the flip side of this, while you're doing those activities to make sure you have a robust solution, what do you do to extend your runway during that time? Because I think that's where some people would get caught up, right? They're like, okay, so I got to get my solution right, but I can't do this forever. So what would be your advice for extending runway?
Yeah, so I think you've got to have some gate checks in that process where you can show your investors and potential investors, that you are making progress. I think there's companies that do that very well. I think OSARO is certainly one of those. But you also, I think. And this is the side that I might not be as familiar with, but you also have to be calculated with where you're getting your investment dollars.
Yeah.
And so just like you're going to find a partner or a partnership with your customers, you got to find a partnership with your investors that are going to, have the faith that you're going to be able to make this work.
Yeah.
There's that. And then, it's a lot of case studies and things like that with your deployments, which then goes a long way within the industry.
Yeah. What is the secret to? Because I feel like this is where I struggle with a lot of companies. Not everyone can get the case studies that they want. Like especially as someone that hosts a podcast.
Yeah.
I'd like to be more case study centric. They're like, sorry, this customer doesn't want to do a case study. I'm like, well, why?
Yeah.
They're a customer of yours. They should be excited to do a case study.
There's so many customers out there that are using such great technology, from AGVs to, pick and place robots to now you're seeing drones for quality and inventory inspection, things like that. What I have found to work really well is if you are if you're trying to get a contract with a customer for the first time, there's a lot of give and take on both sides.
Yeah.
And I had a person that I had worked for at one time that says, don't give anything to the customer without getting something in return.
Yep.
And so I have made I've made an effort to negotiate in contracts that if we give you a price reduction, or if we decide to, take on a little bit more risk in this part of the contract, then you have to give us a testimonial.
Yeah. I like that. I'm also going to add something as a podcaster for future things, because I've had companies that are like, we want to get this person, we did a case study to talk about it more, but it's like they do the testimonial and that's it.
Yeah.
I would add another clause about, hey, you'll do the testimonial and maybe we'll talk about this in other future opportunities as well, because then I think that's a win for everyone.
That's
and
exactly
obviously
right.
This comes very biased as a podcaster, but
Sure.
at the end of the day, that's more avenues to get that story shared than
Right.
just the testimonial on the website. So
That's exactly right.
anyway, that was that. I think that might have been the first time I threw a personal plug into this podcast before, like literally in the history of the podcast. We got to get back to you, because you mentioned something earlier on that I do want to dig into a bit more. You mentioned one of the success factors at OSARO has been the fact that the founders, I'll let you use the word you used earlier, but your founders have come from like VC, startups, a lot of different backgrounds. Tell us the value of that.
It's understanding the market a little bit better and what the need is in the market.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we were really fortunate to have Derek Pridmore come from the VC world, because he was looking at these types of technologies
Yeah.
and sort of where they fit into the marketplace, and just knowing that there was a real business need
Yeah.
was probably one of the things that set us apart.
Yeah.
Right. And then developing your product to solve that business need.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really where the advantage comes from, having some folks come from industry.
Yeah.
Look, people that come from academia are awesome. They've developed some really great technologies, and now it's kind of like, I've created this technology. Where can I now put it?
Yeah.
It's not looking at the industry and then creating the technology for it.
I have a fun little, I'll call it a game we're going to play, but we're going to pick 4 personas, and I want to share 4 personas at startups and like the strength they bring, right? So, let's say VC, someone that's been with a VC,
Yep.
someone that's been with a startup, someone that's been with a large established company, as well as academia.
Okay.
And I can riff with you on this as well, too, because
Sure.
I've got my own perspectives. But let's start. Value of industry. We'll start with the easy one.
Okay.
What does that bring to the table?
The value of industry is you understand the products that need to be deployed, call it within your system. So, for example, like MK, one of our co-founders, knows new vision and software code really, really well.
Yeah.
And so being able to pair the right camera for that system, but also understanding that it needed to be low cost
Okay.
so the consumer could purchase it, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I think that's probably one of the most important things. And I think it all boils down to cost.
Yeah.
It really does boil down to cost.
I'll add one kind of in a different vein. I think coming from industry, particularly large organizations, is they also understand how large organizations make decisions and how long it takes for large organizations to make decisions.
That's
I think
correct.
that's when someone comes from the startup world, which we'll get there next. I think sometimes or oftentimes they underestimate the bureaucracy you have to go through to get something across the finish line, and you can be hoodwinked or a little naive thinking you're almost there.
Yeah.
When really you've just filled out step 1 of 5 of the vendor approval process
That's
at
right.
that point, for lack of a better word. So that's industry startups. What does someone that has that startup experience bring to the table?
So I think the startup experience, and this is probably I hate to use the term. I'm going to be like a career startup guy, but there's people like that out in the world
Yeah.
where they're
Well,
just
this is an area you can speak to
Yeah,
confidently because you've done this multiple times.
It's just it's being gritty. It's never giving up. Um, it's it's doing your best to never get that no. And learning how to use very few resources
Yeah.
effectively.
Yep. I would echo the same things. I also look at it as your team, which is probably a smaller team, is typically extremely committed. Like, everyone is all in. If you're hiring the right way, you might have been
Right.
in situations where you've seen maybe that not play out as ideally as
Right.
I've described it.
Right.
Let's talk about the VC side. What
Yep.
is someone that has, let's say they're at a startup now, but they've been in the VC chair before, which I guess I can't personally say where I've seen that before, but maybe you've seen that more.
So I think with having a VC background, you've seen a lot of competing technologies. And you understand what those technologies are doing well and what they're not doing well.
Ooh, that's a great point.
Right? So you kind of have this insider knowledge of how to create or what the best product needs to comprise of.
Yeah.
Right?
Great answer. Now let's go to your buddies over on the academic side. What is the strength that academia brings to the table? Because it's funny, I was just in Pittsburgh a while ago, and the ideas coming out of Carnegie Mellon, there's some killer ideas that are getting commercialized coming out of there.
Well, before I answer that question, what breweries did you visit in Pittsburgh? I lived there for 8 years.
So I have a few favorites in Pittsburgh. Grist House is probably my all-time favorite. I've been to Dancing Gnome a couple times. We went there. We went to the new-ish Pittsburgh Brewing Company, a little outside of town, that revived the old Icy Light and Iron City beer brand. And then it's been on my list for a while, and I finally made it there. Is it Cinderlands? Is that what it is?
Yep.
Cinderlands, yeah. Those
In
are
the Strip District.
Yep, those are probably my top 4 that are out there in Pitt. What about you?
So Grist House is definitely number one. In fact, we liked it so much, my wife and I, we were engaged at the time, and that was on our list of places to get married.
Oh, really?
But
it's a beautiful spot. The hillside is right behind it. Like, it's just to paint the picture for the folks out there listening. It is a picturesque brewery.
It is, but at the time, it didn't have pavement.
Oh, okay.
And we took my in-laws to go see the brewery. They're like, we can't have everybody like hanging out on gravel.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
I would accept that argument.
Yeah, I'd say Grist House, Cinderlands, and the one of the unique ones, which is, beer. Everybody has got their own opinions about how good the beer is. Church Brew Works. I don't know if you went there.
That's in a church, right?
They took an old Catholic church and put a brewery.
They're not
inside of it.
I think there's one of those it might be in Michigan somewhere. I've been to one like that in Portland, Oregon. Have not been to the one in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it's a unique experience. So
yeah,
good spot.
I'm glad we gave everyone like a tour of Seaport in Boston as well as a nice brewery tour of Pittsburgh. People are going to be coming to this for the startup and beer resources in this episode.
Well, next time you're in the Carolinas, you got to come visit me in Greenville, and I'll take you to the breweries around there. So
when I do a tour of the Southeast, I think Greenville has solidified itself as a tour stop.
Yeah.
It's kind of right halfway between Charlotte and Atlanta.
That's correct.
So just a perfect spot to hit more of a mid-market.
Yeah.
Greenville's a cool town.
Would love to host you. Okay, so going back, what do
you've been avoiding saying a good thing about the academic guys.
No,
Come on.
the academic guys are the backbone of tech.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of these ideas and a lot of these technologies have come out of the Carnegie Mellons and the MITs and the Stanfords of the world, and it's now how to get those ideas to become actual plausible businesses is the biggest question. Having been in Pittsburgh for 8 years and working for Sigrid, it was a company that was born out of Hans Marevik, who was one of the lead roboticists out of Carnegie Mellon. So there's companies out there that have had, their place in their roots that started in academia
Yeah.
and have done really well. And so there's a lot of respect to be had to those guys as well.
And the area where I would give kudos to academia is the sheer importance of having a pillar institution or pillar institutions like that as part of the ecosystem, because there is longer term research that takes place there. So maybe it isn't the person in academia that's starting the company, but some of the people starting the companies might be taking a lot of inspiration. I shouldn't even say inspiration, practical applications out of the university and into the field.
That's right.
So it is an invaluable part to an ecosystem. The whole point of this segment was obviously to share the different strengths of the different folks that bring the startups.
Yeah, and everybody has their place. I mean, look, we've got academics and business people and interns and people coming out of software engineering programs as a part of OSARO, and you need all of those people to make a business successful.
Yeah, no, completely agree. As we wrap up, I want to talk about something else, because I think one thing that was unique about OSARO is a lot of the growth happened, as I understand it, without a lot of marketing behind it.
Yeah.
It was, and that almost seems counterintuitive in this day and age where it's, a lot of people preach to startups. It's like, it's not if you build it, they will come, right? So how did that work in terms of being able to get to where OSARO is today until more recently, doubling down on some marketing efforts?
Yeah, so I think we started the conversation off with focus.
Yeah.
And OSARO had really focused on getting the technology right, but not only getting, call it the piece-picking technology right, it was integrating it with other technologies within the warehouse.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
To make what we're doing a system, like a holistic system. So, yeah, it might not be the sexiest thing in the world, but we're picking apparel and we're picking random items that come to us in a tote, and we're placing them into an auto bagger.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's a really simple task, but we're pairing the auto bagging technology with the OSARO picking technology to make it one complete system, so that we can deploy that into a customer site.
Yeah.
Where they no longer need, manual labor to do that work, and they can take that manual labor that they were once using and reallocate it to a more, a more value add task within the warehouse.
So my understanding then that the fact that, as I heard that, you started with like the very niche solution that needed to be perfected.
Yeah.
And you've built out the broader, let's say, full-scale system around it now.
Correct.
And as a result of that, it's more marketable now. I just want to make sure I'm following
That's
that
exactly
appropriately.
right.
Okay.
We can market a full system. We can go to a customer and say, we see auto baggers within your facility, and we can pair our technology with them.
I get it.
Right? Or you have an ASRS system in your facility. We can put our robot at the pick port of that ASRS system.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you have AMRs in your facility that are transporting individual or few items at a time. We can pick those items and place them onto your AMRs. We can integrate those technologies together.
Yeah.
So they're not fragmented. And I think the what it boils down to is you got to look at the full process of a facility and not just one little piece.
Knowing what you know now about marketing, and this might go against kind of your answer a little bit, so I want to hear your honest take on this. Would you have encouraged OSARO to do marketing earlier, or do you think you came in and you all did it at the right time?
I think what they did from a marketing perspective previously was probably just enough for where they were in the company's life cycle.
Mm-hmm.
But I think now that we have, again, several production installs throughout the United States and Asia, now that we have actual products that marry several pieces of technology together,
Mm-hmm.
we're now hitting the market really hard
Yeah.
with with you know video content,
Yeah.
and because we actually have things to show.
Fair. All right. I dig that. So let me ask. This is a good way to wrap this part of the conversation. Then, what would be your advice to startups that are trying to balance just getting a frickin' customer,
Yeah.
right? That are trying to balance getting their solution right, and that are also trying to balance the storytelling to get their solution out there. It
Yeah.
kind of brings together three of the major things we talked about: the marketing, the product and technology, and then get like literally getting customers to the company. Like, what would your advice be to the folks now that you've been with, pretty much a handful of startups at this stage?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it starts with understanding what the need is in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
It then is developing your target, your target market, your target list of customers who you can go after. Is it 3PLs? Is it retail?
Mm-hmm.
Is it e-commerce? Where do you fit? Is it parcel? And then really developing your product to be mature enough to deploy, going after your customers, pouring fuel on the fire in marketing, and then just scaling. I mean, I know that's the answer combines a lot of those together.
There's a customer-centric thread
Yeah.
through all of it.
It is very customer centric, and I don't know which aspect is more important than the other. I think they're all equally important as you go through that company, your company's life cycle.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking us through OSARO's journey, your advice having been in the startup world for as long as you have. We've covered a good amount of ground. Is there anything you wish I would have asked you that didn't come up in this conversation, or any closing items you'd like to highlight? Or a call to action completely outside of startups? We've got a couple areas direct. This is the wild card question.
This is the wild card question. Why don't we talk about sports?
You know what? It's surprising how often, maybe not surprising, that does come up towards the end of these discussions sometimes. Let's talk about sports.
Okay. So, I know you're a Brewers fan, is that correct?
I'm a Cardinals fan.
You're a
actually.
Cardinals fan.
I'm from St. Louis originally. I'm a Bucks fan.
Okay.
That's my Milwaukee team that had no conflicts of interest with my
okay.
existing
All
sports
right.
franchises.
I'm a Tigers fan.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm a Lions fan. I'm a Pistons fan, a Red
Okay.
Wings fan.
So you all for Detroit. That makes sense.
I went to Michigan State, so I'm a huge Spartan fan. This is the first time in a long time where the Pistons are pretty good. They're in the playoffs. They beat the Knicks last night. They're going back to Detroit, and hopefully we can make the series 3-3 before we go back to the Garden. That's exciting. The Tigers are the first in the AL Central, which hasn't happened in a really long time. The Lions might, actually make it to the NFC Championship this year. I don't know about the Red Wings and the Spartans, but I'll take 3 out of 5.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, I'll share a couple things. This is actually a very good personal story, I think, to wrap this interview on. So the reason I apologize about the Tigers is I know what the Cardinals did to them in 2006.
Yes,
so,
they. Yep.
That is. But the
World
Red Wings.
Series.
The Red Wings made my life pretty miserable in the 90s. There were plenty of times.
The Blues had our number too.
Yeah, I know, but not enough to get past it in the playoffs. So the Yzerman slap shot from the blue line in double overtime when Gretzky was on our team, that one still hurts.
I'll never forget that.
Cardinals are kind of wallowing in mediocrity right now. I don't like to talk about that one much. Michigan State has been a pain in my rear for the times we've run into that. I went to Marquette, so we've run into them in the tournament recently.
Yep.
But I'll end on a positive note for me as a Blues fan. When the Blues were in the Stanley Cup Finals in 2019, I had to be here in Boston for a conference. Though the same time, Game 6 and 7 against the Bruins were going on.
Awesome.
And one thing I've learned over time is one of the worst investments you can make is going to a high stakes away game for your team, because the upside of winning is not that high, and the downside of losing will make it one of the worst nights of your life. So I didn't go anywhere near the arena on Game 7,
yeah.
but I came here to Trillium Brewing to watch the Blues beat the Boston Bruins in Game 7. I was having a great night. I didn't get beat up, which was great, and some tears of happiness were shed.
Awesome.
So this is
awesome.
The Blues have a relatively high stakes playoff game tonight, so I may or may not be changing my outfit before the comedy night starts here.
I think you should.
I think I will too. I feel like a comedy night, this is the appropriate spot to. It might result in some good heckling.
Yeah.
So we'll go that direction. But speaking of the comedy night, we got to get to the party. So
I have one question for you.
Okay. All right.
How has your life changed since you started this and went out on your own?
I mean, there's certainly trying to think of like a novel answer to this, because of course there's freedom and flexibility and lifestyle and things like that. I'll share something that's kind of a different spin on that. It gives me time to appreciate the little things that are really cool about running your own business and running a podcast that's predominantly done inside of breweries and bars, right?
Yeah.
One of my favorite little things is when I show up to a place like today at Trillium, and I'm trying to look for the right spot to do the podcast, right? Because normally it's not like reserved or anything, right? So I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to do it on my own. I have to kind of scout out the facility to find like a really cool spot.
Right.
And having like, finding this area where it's like, you know what? We got the brick backdrop. Like, we're right in the middle of the vinyl lounge. We're a little protected from the sound.
Right.
I love that little aspect about it. So life has certainly changed in a lot of ways, right? The freedom, the flexibility, the autonomy, all great things. But my advice, hopefully that applies to anyone, is like appreciate the little things in what you do. And that's one of my favorite little things about running
Well, it sounds
this
like you
podcast.
went through the startup journey as well on your own.
It is a let's say it's a bootstrap startup.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
No VC backing.
Yeah.
So I always like learning from folks that are on the other side of that, though. So with that, Adi, cheers. Thanks so much for
man.
being on Manufacturing Happy
Thanks
Hour.
for having me. I really appreciate it.
A lot of fun.